This video. I am your host, Shirley Worley. Follow me everywhere: TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. I go live there Mondays, weekly updates. You heard. Anyways, so this is our handy dandy Astro Seek. You're gonna go into Astro Seek. I'm gonna show you how to pull up your natal chart. You're gonna put in all your information. I actually have an account, so I'm just gonna go in the ad account, click it. You're going to come here. Before you leave here, please go to extend the setting. Please go to extend the setting. Please go to extend the setting. Please go to extended setting. I had to sound like a broken record because I get asked this question a lot. So you're going to go to house systems. We're going to put it in whole signs because we're going to learn the whole signs way. It's easier, it's neater. It's for you to understand that the wheel has 12 zodiac signs from Aries to Pisces, and they represents 12 areas of your life, which we're gonna break down today. And that's what the houses are. They're basically different areas of life. And sometimes people want to know, oh, I want to know more about my relationship. I want to know more about um my money, my why do I always have problems with taxes, my insurance, what should I do to go to college, what should I do as my purpose, what should I do for my career, or stuff, different concepts. Anyways, and we're going to show you how to do that today. So once you have your handy dandy, I want you to take a look at, let's learn the wheel. So notice how all around it there's the signs, right? And then everything's divided into even houses. Notice how we have even houses, no intercepted lines. These black lines are measured due to your hour of birth. So depending on your hour of birth, they're going to cast an exact degree, which are important to you. So like, for instance, this 15 degrees is important alongside the 7 degrees. And if you notice, they repeat. So the 15 repeats the midhaven, which is your career, your purpose, your communications with your highest point. Literally, some people ask me, what is the best time to manifest? Well, transit to your midhaven would be the best, because it's the highest point or measurement in your chart according to your time of birth, obviously. And your IC is more of your roots, so things that hit your inner core and what kind of things make you like sad and stuff like that. For instance, like mine, this person has it in their third house, so things with their siblings, cousins, would be important to them, or it makes them, it's very important to their core or development, their emotional development. Then we have this descendant and ascendant line, which is where you figure out who you are more with the rising. So I'm referring to like your identity, who you are as a person, how you dress, how you look, can be told by this ascendant, while the descendant kind of describes your partner. So your partner is read counterclockwise. So let's pretend, like, for instance, if you're a Cancer rising, your partner is a Capricorn rising. Just for the purposes of this video, I will be referencing Michael Jackson's chart. Why? Because we all know Michael, and we all kind of know his life. So I figured he'd be the best example to use, right? And okay, so let's get started. Let's start off with the first house. The first house is our body, is the house of self, personality, outlook on our life. It's our behavior, literally how you dress. Transits to your first house. When I say transits, this means so this is your time, this is your chart, but obviously there's things moving or happening as we speak right now in the sky. And for instance, for an example, one of those let's say for instance there was a lot of, for instance, this is a rising sign. If we had a lot of planets in Cancer right now, which we're not because we're in Aquarius season, February season, excuse me, it would be happening here in our first house. So it would be a brand new renewal to the body. So for instance, let's say we look at Michael Jackson's as an example. This is called a transit chart. So the orange planet, it looks like layers. Excuse me. And the orange planet are the transiting planets that are happening currently right now. So if we look at Michael Jackson, he has a lot going on in his first house. This is to date, because Saturn is coming into his first house. I'm pretty sure they're going to have a documentary series. But anyways, I'm just using it as an example. Even after you're gone or past, your chart's still showing things about you, your legacy, your name. So, for instance, he has a lot of stuff over here in this region. All his planets are over here, which is about the self, the identity, his finance, his family, things that are like his creative ventures. So we don't know what's going on, obviously, because Michael's not gone. Duh. But I'm just showing you an example. If you're a Pisces rising, you would be feeling that right now. Okay, so if we take a look at the chart, just simple stuff. we notice that one, Michael Jackson is a Pisces rising. Okay. And we also notice that he has a moon in Pisces. And he has a 10 degrees rising sign specifically. So what does that mean? Well, first of all, the 10 degrees is associated with Capricorn energy, which is in his 11th house always. So every degree takes you back to that house of that sign. So in this case, it would be his 11th house. And for instance, the 11th house is the audience, the public, his knees. The 11th house rules the knees, actually. And it's actually his older sibling. And it's interesting because he was in a band group with his older sibling. And it would be interesting that he has the 10 degrees up there because he did look like them at first in the beginning, right? Then we have the moon. So now, just to slow down, we have a couple things. He kind of looks like his siblings or the older siblings. He has the Pisces attributes, which would be the eyes. Pisces rules the eyes and the feet, which I don't know if you noticed, but Michael Jackson did invent the moonwalk, right? Moonwalk is a dance that he looks kind of like he's mystical, flying with his feet, right? And that is because Pisces is his first house. So he became a memorable icon. When you look at your first house, yes, you want to look at the symbol that is the rising sun. So this is the house, first house, ascendant, ASC, right? And we have Pisces. Well, you know Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. So you would look for Jupiter, the symbol. So you would come here to legend and find that symbol, which is right here. And Jupiter is in the 8th house, right? For instance, in this case. But at the same time, he does have a moon in Pisces. So what you want to do is when you have planets in the first house, and I want to remind you about this, the first house planets kind of act like Aries. So whatever there is, whatever they represent, let's say, for instance, the moon is nurturing emotions. They're in the first house. You're going to be very aggressively showing that planet. So, for instance, we always seen Michael Jackson. He's always been an emotional person, a very sensitive person. And he's always been eager to show that to the world. Why? Because his moon is in the first house of the body. It's very seen. It's very in your face. Mind you, the moon rules in this case, you want to look at what else the planets, where they belong or where, naturally. So for instance, the moon belongs to Cancer. And I'm going to show you that right now. Let's get into the rulership. So every sign has a ruling planet. All right. So you would look for Cancer, or you would look for the planet. For instance, moon rules Cancer. So if you go back to your chart, the moon is in here, and you will look for Cancer, which is the 5th house. What is the 5th house, right? You go back. Well, the 5th house is creativity, personal self-expression, like performing or showcasing your personality, pleasures, objections of affection, children, pets, lovers, vacations, hobbies, games, speculative gains like stock market, and it's day trading of stock market, not long-term investing. Then we have the need for attention. But overall, the 5th house is the house of performance. It's another great house to have your planets in. Or the planets of your first going into the 5th. Right? So that's what that means. Whenever you have a planet that belongs to another place, is the rulership is in another house. So the ruler of the 5th house is in the 1st. Which means his way of self-expression is with the body. Dancing, performing, being seen, which obviously you know all his life, he's been doing that. The moon is in his 1st house. So even if we look at the annual perfections, which I will show you at the end, annual perfections, you can see that each house is activated a certain year. And I will show you that in the next clip. Our annual perfection worksheet. So this is another part that will definitely help you understand your chart and come to see it alive or picture it. So for instance, when you look at a chart, every house is activated a certain year. So if you look, the 1st house is activated ages 0, 12, 24, 36, 48. And if we look at your chart, that's the 1st house year. You want to look at what planets you have there and what happened those years. So you go back and wait, What moon thing happened that year? So what did I perform? Did I have a child? Did I have a lover? What did I go to school? Right? The fifth house also rules learning, what you go to school for, which we'll talk about that in the next round. But let's go into the second house. The second house is your possessions, values, resources, personal, financial security. For instance, it tells me what you do with your money, how you make your money, you if you meet obligations or meeting obligations. Also, you when you have transits in the second house, you could kind of have different things happening with your self-worth, your self-confidence. This is an internal thing. Okay, material and non-material resources. Okay, again, look at it says self-worth. So what you do is you're gonna go in here. This is the one of my favorite houses. This is the money house. So a lot of people want to know, how can I make money? Well, one thing, you want to use your Placidus and you want to use your whole signs. But if we look, your second house, you want to look at the sign. So we have an Aries second house. You want to look at the planets that are in there, which is Lilith and the South Node, or K2. This symbol right here is known as K2, or the South Node, which is past life, or karmic things, or things that you are already used to. So, or this is the house of family. So, for instance, Michael Jackson, he worked with his family. He's used to this K2 things. He used to having a lot of material wealth and luxury, which obviously he did. He grew up in it, right, since a young age. Now, this is also his face. That's funny because he had a lot of changes happening to his face as it got older, right? But both of these two planets do not rule Mars, or they do not represent Aries. So again, we're going to go back to our chart. We're going to look for Aries, and Aries is ruled by Mars. And if we look, his Mars, again, we're going to use our legend. Mars is the symbol right here. His Mars is in the third house of communications. Let's find out. So in order for him to activate his second, he needs to know his third. So his third house is about the conscious mind, communications, near environment, short journeys, early education, how you learn, self-expression, another one. Because this is the first house where you take courage and you communicate with the world. This is siblings, neighbors, and short distance travel. So for instance, he used to travel around with his family and siblings performing, singing, which is a Taurus thing. He's actually very good at, he was the best singer. His voice was different and unique. So how do I know that? Well, as you get better with charts, you'll start understanding certain houses will like certain planets. So for instance, Mars likes the third house. It actually does the best here because this is the house of skills. This is the house of mind, and Mars is the planet of action and agility, which means he has the agility and the smartness to continue learning a skill, developing the skill, sharpening it. Literally, Mars rules the planet of sharpness, right? So in order for him to get his second, he needs to understand his third. So that's how you need to start seeing it and how it comes alive. Like, what can I do in the neighborhood to get a job? Can I work with my siblings? Can my siblings put me onto something? Then when you find a planet, notice how these planets make a contact to other things. We have these lines coming out of it because they are at a certain degree. And every degree has a meaning, and it will take you back to a certain situation. So for instance, this is a 22 degrees. This is a Capricorn degree. And mind you, this is, a lot of people are scared of this degree. Nothing to be feared. I also have that degree, but it does bring a little bit of shock worthy, especially if it's in a fixed sign. So for instance, again, when you have that 22 degrees or any degree you have, you want to go back to the symbol that it rules. So in this case, Capricorn is his 11th house. All of his siblings were older than him that he was working with and he used to do music with, right? And this is an audience thing. I think one time he also performing, he also have gotten injured by a fire. He has a weak Mars, and one time there was a fire that changed his whole life. When he had I don't know if you guys ever heard that story, but he does have a weak Mars. That's what the weakness come in. So he had a weak Mars, and he had a moment where that a fire happened, and this is the reason why. Because of that, what ended up happening kind of slowed things down for him. Anyways, but that's near there. I just wanted to give you an example. So you look at one house, we look at the resources. How do we activate that resource? Then we go back to fit what those planets are. So what do they mean? So another thing that I want to show you, because you may not know those meanings, you can find these things online to get more definitions. But the maturity of planets will also come into play in your own natal chart. So every house has a planet, and that planet has an age of maturity. So for instance, Mars doesn't come into fruition until 28 years old. But again, Michael Jackson has been performing since he was 5, right? And if you notice, all these planets are old. As you 16 is the youngest. So why was Michael Jackson performing at such a young age, right? And I'm going to tell you why. Let's go back here. So his ruling rising sign planet, which is important. The main character is the first house. And his first house ruler is Jupiter and is in the eighth house with the North Node. Things when you have your ruling rising planet with the North Node, things kind of happen really fast for you. And it starts to unravel quite fast the first 18 years of life, because up until 18 years old, your Rahu is trying to work itself out, if that makes sense. So that may be another reason why you feel like your life is moving so quickly, is because Rahu and what he's doing in the chart. Okay, so that is our second house. So what do I do to make and find more money? How can I activate that if you're not trying to do that? Well, so for instance, again, you want to look at what house year you're living in. So especially the second house is activated in the first, when you are 1 years old, 13 years old, 12, 25, 37. Okay, so you can go back to those years so you can get a reference. How did I activate that? How did that work? But for instance, what I would do is transits to Mars will continue to show you how your money fluctuates. So what does that mean, transits to Mars? Again, you want to pull up the transits of the day, which is this right here. Or for instance, you go to the current planets and you just want to check out what Mars is doing. Is Mars retrograde? Well, no. Mars is in Gemini. So how does that work with my Mars? That's how you want to start seeing it. How can I work with my Mars and how can I use it? So for instance, right now, if I was a Pisces rising, like Michael Jackson, that Mars and Gemini would be in the fourth house. So maybe getting a working at home job or something I initiate. The fourth house is still an initiation cardinal house. So the way this person will make money right now, any Pisces rising, they would have to orchestrate it. They would have to initiate it or work from home. Okay? So that was one way. You don't have to wait till Mars moves kind of slow too. You don't have to wait just for that. But you can also get new moons or full moons happening in Aries, and your second house can help your finances. Aries season, which is in April or October season, will fluctuate your finances again. Okay, so you want to take a look at how to benefit that. Okay, so even this, for instance, his Mars is in Taurus, which means Venus actually is the one that fluctuates it, because Taurus is a Venus sign. So in order to understand his Mars, you really got to follow Venus. Isn't that? It's really interesting. So that is the best way I can explain for your second house. Let's moving on to your third house. Your third house is your, again, we read it, conscious mind, communication, siblings. I love the third house. The third house is when you become more courageous. Okay, third house is your mind, communications, short distance travel, your earth siblings, your neighbors, your ground transportation, meaning like you can also see your vehicle stuff happening in your third house. The third house is a great house. Is it brings you to the market houses. So if you notice from here, the third house trines your 11th and your 7th. These are the market houses. What do I mean by the market? Selling things online and the shipping and handling, getting a job, speaking to strangers. The first time you speak to strangers, especially like for instance, the third house is when you are 14 second at even 2 years old. Is that when kids start talking back to other people? That is literally when it's called terrible twos, literally, because you are a menace at that time. This is the Gemini kind of energy house. Things kind of happen faster. Even though you may have Taurus in there, that means your Taurus expresses itself like a Gemini. That's how you're supposed to interpret it. So, for instance, if you have siblings and they're Taurus, they can all be Tauruses, but they maybe talk a lot, or They have a nice face, for instance. Like Janet Jackson has a nice face, but she surgery her face up. He has Mars in here. She did surgery to her face. So did Latoya, an example. You know, you could see this in any sibling chart. Like if you pull up the twins. Like if you look at Mary Kate and Ashley, they're twins. They're gonna have things in their third house because they're literally twins, right? So the third, looking at again, same process. You want to look at your third house. What is the sign? I have a Taurus. You want to automatically look for the ruler of Taurus, which is in the sixth house. Again, I'm showing you our rulerships. Excuse me. These are the ruling planets. You want to look for them here. So we have a Mars in Taurus. It doesn't belong to Venus or Taurus, but Venus is in the sixth house. So in order for you to understand your third, you got to understand your sixth. So let's go find out what the sixth is. Is work, employment, co-workers or subordinates, working conditions, health, the work you do on your body, diet, hygiene, service, duties, daily tasks. This is also a very karmic house. People don't, in Vedic astrology, they also have a different definition. The sixth house is karmic because it requires work for you to do it. It's one of the most challenging houses. It's kind of very far away from your ascendant. And obviously it affects your health. It does a lot of physical laborious things. Is actually known as the house of slaves type shit. So yeah. And when you have a lot of planets in the sixth house, they could be a little karmic because you have like this karma that you have to kind of do or fulfill, for instance. And say, for instance, Michael Jackson used to work a lot. His parents or his dad specifically would make him do a lot of work or a lot of hours. His it was a very strict kind of energy, which is interesting because he has a Leo sixth house. If you notice, Leo is representing the father figure, right? Even this, it still kind of plays out every symbolism. So this is the Virgo complicated house, but it's run by a Leo, which is a parent, a father runs this sixth house. You know what I mean? So Virgo, that means that the Virgo energy is in the seventh house, meaning that he act with his partners. He's more of Virgo, critical, and on Virgo pressure to them. You know what I mean? So that's how you're supposed to read it. If this is my eighth house? What kind of Libra things I do? So if I do a lot of contracts with people, Libra rules contracts, relationships, are very intense. That could be for Pisces or wherever you have Libra. Like, for instance, I have Libra in my fourth house. So a lot of people like to make family relationships with me because my Libra is in my fourth house. For an example, you could do that with any sign. For instance, you are Pisces. Your friends are not always around you. They're far. They're distant from you because they're your 12th house. So you're not really around them. That's an example. Okay. So anyways, moving on to the fourth house. Let's go on to your fourth house. These houses are very good. The cardinal houses. These are your four main pillars. And when you're reading a chart, the first thing you want to check out is the main pillars. Fuck the little signs. The main pillars are important because without the four main pillars, you can't hold this chart up. So for instance, if a person is a Cancer ascendant, but they're not stable in their home, how can they be Cancerian? How can they nurture themselves if their home stability is not nurtured? Cancer represents the home, if that makes sense. So the fourth house is in Gemini. It's ruled by Mercury for them. Mercury is in his sixth house as well. So we have his ruler of his third and fourth in the sixth, which again, his home and even his mother was controlled by this man, his father. That's what that means. The fourth house really tells me information about your mother, how your home is, how your living conditions are. And transits here can also tell if you've had a home in a while or for how many years, even things opposing stuff like here, if that makes sense. So, and mind you, he spent a lot of time traveling, and then he lived in a museum park. Look how cool this is. His fourth house is Gemini. Gemini is ruled by Mercury and Leo in the sixth house. He lived in adventure land. He created his own land. He innovated this. It was a museum park. Literally, it's in the chart. That's how cool it is. But let me show you what else it tells you. The roots, the homes, parents, particularly your mother. It also tells me about your ancestors. You also kind of brings out your subconscious mind. along because it also brings up the 12th house, also brings your subconscious mind. So they're all kind of the same way. You notice how they keep repeating these words? It's because, to be quite honest, your first, fifth, and ninth all trine each other. They all work each other. So when you have a transit happening in one of these houses, all of them feel it. So does your fourth, 12th, and your eighth house. When you have a transit going on in your fourth house, you still do research, eighth house psychological things. It could have came from a crisis. It does some type of transformation, even if it's a transit in your fourth. You know, it still brings the 12th house. You know, changes in your sleeping, in your expenses. For instance, like let's say right now, okay, if you were a Capricorn rising, Jupiter's in your fourth right now. If you have a transit in your fourth, I'm just giving you an example. They would be spending money at home right now to make their home more comfortable, whatever that is. That's an expense. That's the 12th house. Anyways, moving on. So we're going to go into your, again, we already did the fifth house. The fifth house rules your first child and your lovers. So if you meet a new lover, sometimes you get a new transits in your fifth house, or if you fall in love. If you've been getting eclipse in that house, you can also be falling in love, like Taurus, Cancer risings and Capricorn risings. You're getting eclipse in the love house. Currently, right now, they're the two signs getting eclipsed there. The fifth house is not just lover, it's what you're learning is a hobby of yours. So let's say you've been doing fan duel, or you've been doing astrology. That's the fifth house. It becomes it's something that you like to do. It's a hobby that you kind of start working on, and if you really like it, you perfect it, and it becomes it helps your confidence, and it becomes your skill set, right? So the fifth house, again, you want to do the same thing. Do you have any planets there? What are those planets about? How do we combine them? But if not, we look for the ruler. The ruler of the fifth is in the first. Again, I showed you how he's self-expression. My ruler of my fifth is in the fifth. I like to learn. Every time I learn, I make it fun. It's fun for me. So we all different stuff, right? So let's look at the sixth house again. We already read the sixth house, which is work, employment, co-workers. It's also a karmic house. It's also the house of debt as well, because in there you can sign up to loans. You could take on debt. So like people right now that have had a lot of transits in there. This is also the house of liars. Interesting enough, because it opposes the 12th house. So each house also opposes their opposing house. So the first opposes the seventh, which talks about the decisions you make via someone else or not someone else. Is literally the seventh house is the decisions that you make. First house, you know. So the sixth house, for instance, we got a lot of planets in the sixth house. That means that let me show you what this means. Uranus is a modern ruler. So I'm going to show you that the modern rulers are Aquarius rules it. And what does that mean? So when you look at Uranus, you want to also go take a look at the Aquarius house, so you could get more details about it. Like, for instance, he created his own adventure creative land. The 12th house is a creative house. It is an escape house. He lived somewhere where he can escape at and work from. So, for instance, we have Uranus in his sixth house, the ruler of the 12th coming in the sixth. He works at a fun, creative place. Venus is in his sixth house. It rules. He has karma with his siblings. We know how and why. Mercury is also the fourth house ruler. He has karma with his home and family and his emotions. He wasn't able to express his emotions the right way. Some people say he's weird in the way he communicated, which is true, because you could see him. Uranus literally rules weird. And that's what one of the ways that they describe Michael. And I'm just using this example. You could do the same thing with your own chart, okay? The seventh house. Okay, so the seventh house, now we're coming into that descending line. Now, these lines and all these degrees get activated. Now, you would know by transits. So again, if you come to your transit chart, and I'm going to show you that's the current planets, all these lines and things are activated by planets. So like, for instance, if you look at the planets currently, you look for those degrees. Like, so a lot of people ask me when I'm going to meet a partner or someone. Well, look at your descendant line. What degree is that? If you can't see that, look at it over here. Is that, for instance, here, his descendant line, you can't see it. It's 10 degrees because it's already even, but it's 10 degrees because if the ascendant is 10, that means the descendant is 10. It repeats. It follows. So maybe whenever, so what do I do? I look for things of when is something going to hit 10 degrees. Like for instance, Jupiter is literally at 9 degrees right now. So that could be an exciting time for some people if you would have that 10 degrees or that 9 degrees for some people. You just got to find out what that is for you. Anyways, the seventh house. The seventh house, I'm going to do a longer video because a lot of people ask me about that. But the seventh house is your partnerships. It could show you a description of the person you're going to be with. Now, I don't want to use Michael Jackson because we don't know any of his lovers, but I know that his lover gave him a child, and I think that's what he got them there for. But I will show you an example with another celebrity. Jada Pinkett Smith. I'm probably saying that wrong. But anyways, this is Jada. She's married to Will Smith. We know this, right? So we looking at her seventh house. We have a Gemini, which is funny because people don't know this, but Will Smith is a Gemini rising. He is actually. But he's a Gemini. So what are the qualities of Gemini? Talkative, communicative, witty. They're jokesters, right? And literally that's what Will Smith is known for. He's a jokester. He jokes around a lot. And you're supposed to read it in this direction to really understand your partner. So we have Saturn in there. It describes the partner. The partner could be older, or they have karma with this partner, or the partner has Saturn lessons, either with, it depends on what their Saturn is, either with the public or the world. But notice how now, as you get older, the world's always judging their relationship. Saturn is the planet of fear, right? And karma. And it also represents like, necessarily represents morals, but I understand why they're always judging them, because Jupiter, if you notice, Jupiter opposes her Saturn. So they're always judging their relationship and how it is. Okay, and if we go this way, there's a Cancer house, right? He has a familiar face, moon-like face. And notice how the ruler of her seventh house is in the fourth house or the 10th house away from each other. So from here is 4 houses away. But from her seventh house is in the 10th house, which means her husband has a great public image or is publicly known, or right? And he is. He's an actor. If you notice, Mercury is the ruler of her seventh house with the moon and sun. So the sun is the ruler of the ninth and the eighth. He brings a lot of the money, right? Most of her money may be coming from her. Mind you, look, Saturn rules her second house, is in the seventh house. He is the money. Duh, we've known this for years, right? So that's an example of how you're supposed to read your the seventh house, for an example. So that was Jada. Thank you for that. Again, you can also look at the years that you lived, the seventh house year, 6, 18. You could get more details on what that means. It could give you more examples of where you can meet him at, or for instance, if you want to, we could break that down in another chart. I can do that. So the ruler of the seventh house is important because it'll give you details of where you met your partner, how it is, what kind of person it is. Like if your partner's in the eighth, they give scorpionic energy. If your ruler of your seventh is in the 12th, it might be Pisces, whatever the case may be. Okay, up next, the eighth house, one of my favorite houses, the house of birth, death, reproduction, transformation. Your money mixing with other people's money, whether it's through marriage, through business, through anything like that, or money that comes from any different source, okay? Credit, tax, insurance, joint finances, investments, big business, sex, spirituality, inheritance. The eighth house is also known as the house of clients. So if you are trying to have a business, your eighth house is important because it could tell you if you can and how long and what kind of, what the other people would give you money for, okay? So you, again, same process. You want to look at the sign that's in there. That'll tell you how you would get this money somehow. For instance, this is Libra. We look for Venus. Venus is in the 6th house. He has to work for his money, right? And his money is, most of his other people's money it was merged with his dad and his family. Remember that he was part of the Jackson 5. His money was merged with other people. Right, so the 8th house, you want to look at what's in there. So Rahu, again, is a depositor of Aquarius. Okay, for those that don't know. So, and I'm going to show you what is Rahu. We're going to break that down, these planets at the end. But Rahu represents illusions, materialistic desires. And it's basically you get really obsessive with that house and whatever that house is, other people. So for instance, he was very weird to other people. I don't really know him, never met Michael, but to other people he is like a phenomenon. He's like a, and mind you, the North Node is like the elephant in the room, and you know, Michael Jackson sticks out if he comes into a room. That is the eighth house. We have Jupiter in there. Jupiter is the ruler of his first house of his body, which means other people may have been in control of his body, which is interesting how he passed away. And Jupiter is the ruler of his image, his public image. Again, other people in control of it. Saturn, that could be the music industry or the company, whatever. Saturn rules companies. Notice he has Saturn in Sagittarius, and it's the rulership of his 11th and of the 12th. The audience is in control of this phenomenon. Really, they made him this monster. If you really want to put it that way, again, you want to look at your annual perfection so you get what happened at those ages. Okay, so up next we're going into the, before I leave, I do want to tell you again, transits to that house is very good for you if you're in business, finances. Again, the season that is in, when the moon is there, when the sun is transiting in there. Like this is October season, or also any major planets coming in there could bring crisis. So like for instance, Venus transits can bring ultimate changes into a person, into a Pisces rising's life. So whatever, let's say right now Venus is transiting is in Pisces in the first house, when it moves is gonna bring a transformation to the Venus in the Aries in the second house. So that's how you're supposed to interpret it. The eighth house sign brings the eighth house energy with that planet. Okay, so that's how the transits of the planets is what determines how this is gonna play out. Okay, again, I always tell people just work on the year you are currently living in. Again, and it tells you details on how to do that here. Okay, up next, the ninth house, another one of my favorite houses. It looks like this. The ninth house is, in this case, would be Scorpio is the sign. We have Neptune in there. We know Scorpio is ruled by Mars. Mars is in the third house. So the ruler of the ninth is in the third. What is that? So the ninth house. The ninth house is about foreign environments, higher education like college, or getting your philosophy, like learning spirituality, traveling. The ninth house can also bring publishing, things with media. So if you're in that kind of industry, the internet also can be seen from here. Not much so much. I feel like the internet, you could see it in the 11th house, but I wouldn't be surprised if you're in the internet, find learning things like this is where your ethics change. Your higher courts is really where I want to see it. I really do see a lot of legal or ethics stuff happening there. So when you have transits there, and I was in that house again, it could be major long transits or even solar return for the year. You can have like something pop up in your ninth house. It can bring legal situations or legal battles. Okay, for instance, who had a legal battle? Like for instance, Gunna. Gunna's a rapper. He just had a whatever RICO charge. His ninth house was active. He has an Aquarius ninth house, and a lot of planets were going there. And it's no surprise that he just had a legal situation. Or Andrew Tate, you know? Okay, so the ninth house is very good to sell the education of your father. Again, you want to look at the years that those ninth houses active. If you have planets there, you are very much more easier to get recognized for that ability. What does that mean? So like if you have planets there, especially your sun, you want to get recognition, you want to put your name out there, you want to get rewarded for whatever that ninth house is. For you, again, everybody has a different ninth house. The ruler will explain that. It also represents your supervisors, the kind of stuff that you're like how you build your philosophy. Like for instance, I have Jupiter in there. It's a Pisces ruled house. My Jupiter is actually in the fourth house, and I've always worked with investigative fields because they're 8 signs away from each other, and I'll explain that in another live. Or like for instance, this is Mars. Who's a better example of their well, they always say he had a childlike mind mentality, but like for instance, let's look at Mike. I'm using Mike Tyson as an example of like somebody with like their belief system is kind of different, or you know, outside of the box thinking. So if you look at his chart, and again, look what I'm doing. I'm putting it in whole sign system. It comes in Placidus, but I'm putting it in whole signs. So for instance, his ninth house is Aries, which is ruled by Mars. His Mars is in the 11th house, and he has a very outside thinking kind of mindset. Why? Because the 11th house, if we go, the 11th house is hopes, wishes, goals, ideas, humanitarians, associates, acquaintances, groups, friends, business contacts, money made from career. And because of his friends that he's been in so many different industries, he's been able to really see things from different perspective, different views of life. And that's why he's so philosophical right now. I don't know if anybody's ever noticed that. Anyways, it's interesting because now I didn't know that he had Mercury and Leo, which means he's supposed to be public speaking and expressing his ideas. This is a directional place for Mercury. This is one of the, you see, notice how I was telling you certain houses the planets do better at. Mercury does the best in the 11th house. Right. Okay. Saturn in the 8th house makes you very introspective, and you can easily observe others. Okay. So that's an example of somebody with that. Again, you want to use the tool that we have, which is annual perfection worksheet. What age you activated that house, and think back and about what kind of what house it is, what planet it activated, the location of that planet. So for instance, the ruler of the ninth is in the third. What kind of ninth house, third house things did you activate? Do you go traveling a lot during that time? So that is an example of that. Up next, our 10th house, which is one of my the best cool houses. So it's public image, your reputation, your worldly attainment, ambition, sense of mission, profession, career, responsibility. Now, the sense of mission really goes to wherever your midhaven falls. So notice how for, what's his name? Michael Jackson has the midhaven in the 10th house. And for some reason, other people have it in different places. Like for me, I have it in the 9th house. So I don't really want to build public image or reputation, which is the 10th house. It's more of higher knowledge and spiritual communications. It's really more about ethics for me, honestly. For some people, you may not have that. So the sense of duty or mission is your midhaven, while your 10th house does show me what's going on publicly. Like, for instance, we know Drake. Drake's changed his public image completely. So many often he has short hair. Now he has these braids, which I don't really like. But it is an example of how his public image completely changed because he's having heavy transits happening in his 10th house, which are the eclipses. That's an example. So it's even like Chris Brown is another person that's having stuff in his public image. And look how that's going, right? So that is an example of the 10th house. You want to look for the ruler of the 10th house. So what's in there? For instance, Michael Jackson has Saturn. Saturn is the ruler of the 11th and the 12th, which means the ruler of the 11th and 12th is in the 10th. That means that in order for he obtaining this worldly reputation or whatever career, he needs to also hone in and master his 11th and 12th, which is the creative house, his audience, which he does know how to wow the audience. I don't know if you've ever met Michael Jackson. He can melt anyone. Now, Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is in the 8th house again. So for Pisces rising, your body is your career. People just want to look at you. That might be the benefit of being a Pisces rising. So you got to take your wins with your losses, right? So that is my advice for those people that are trying to understand your midhaven. So your midhaven, let's say you have a midhaven like me. I have a Pisces midhaven, which means you have two co-rulers. So you want to go ahead and take a look at the co-ruler as well. It kind of gives you details on how you can also do this. For those that don't know, but your sidereal chart will also have a different layout. You should also read it in your sidereal to get better understanding on how to understand your midhaven. But for simpler matters, whatever planet sits on your MC, literally that black line, more than likely you're going to be doing something related to that. So like, for instance, if your Saturn is next to the MC, you will somehow be part of the government or some type of business industry or some type of being in charge or of something, whether it is the company, the government. Saturn is the authority. Okay. If you have the sun next to your midhaven, like this symbol is next to that black line, you're meant to be seen somehow. Or the Leo house in your chart is highly active. Again, you want to look for it, whatever is next to this black line, the symbol, the planet, whatever planet it is, and then look for what that planet rules. That means that it's bringing that energy in here. So, in order for him to achieve his 10th, he needs to complete the 11th and the 12th, but also the 8th, because that's where Jupiter is. Okay, so that's how much it would take to understand that. Again, you can also use your annual perfection to figure out what happened those years to get an example. Transits there can be very good for you. Like some, if you want to plan out for when your Jupiter return or when Saturn gets on there to get a better result, that would be very helpful to try to plan with your chart. I'm also going to do a live another video on that so you can kind of see how I do it. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to leave it there. The planets. Okay. So on this midhaven, if you have Jupiter next to your midhaven, you want, sometimes it can be that your career is with teaching or guiding others or traveling, depending on how Jupiter's set up in your chart. So again, if you have Jupiter, which is this symbol next to your midhaven, you want to take a look at your Sagittarius and Pisces house. Let's say you have Chiron, this symbol, next to this black line. Chiron rules healing wounds, so, or fixing things. Chiron is a depositor of your Virgo house. So whatever Virgo is in your chart and you have Chiron up there, it could talk about you being the fixer or you being the one that heals this. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Chiron can also be part of administration, people that are good at admin, or the fixer uppers. Okay, so that is Chiron. So let's say you have Lilith up there. I have Lilith up there. That means that you would need to have your own career, own your own thing. Okay, Lilith is also kind of a depositor of energy of Mars. So you can also take a look at Mars, even Pluto, to give you more ideas on how Lilith can work out. Okay. If you have K2 up there, which means you're actually very good at corporate America or being in corporate or having a business, K2. So that also can bring you problems with coworkers or bosses, because K2 is past life karma. So this could, depending on what sign you have K2 in, it can give you more examples of it. And I'm talking about this symbol being up in your 10th house. Okay, if you have Mars in your 10th house, you could be working with a machine. Both Uranus and Mars could tell me that you're working with machines or trucks or cars, or you're doing like things with Mars, things like cutting people, engineering, scientifical things. It depends on how you're, again, if you have Mars up there, where is Scorpio? What is Aries doing in your chart? Okay, it can give you an example of what kind of jobs you're into or you've been into. Okay, so let's say you have this Rahu up in your 10th house. You're actually meant to be in business or seen or be a part of a big industry, something larger than you, because that's what Rahu is about. Rahu likes to expand and like be in, like, especially in technology based kind of field. So if you work in technology or you also trying to get to be seen by the world, Rahu being there can show you more examples of that. Okay. Let's say you have Pluto up there in your midhaven. You may do something Plutonian, which is either insurance, transformation, working with other people's anything, children, their money. You can even be a tattoo artist. Mars or Pluto can make you a tattoo artist up there. Okay, so if you work in an industry where you literally transform the person, that could be Pluto. Okay, Mercury can also be stuff like your public speaking, writing, you're running the administrative work. So whatever planet you got next to this midhaven, remember that planet also rules a house, and you want to go and bring that in and bring it into the topic. Okay, like for instance, Mike Tyson is an example. Look, Mike Tyson has his Rahu on his midhaven. Rahu is in Taurus in his chart. Taurus is ruled by Venus, and his Venus is in Gemini. Gemini rules the hands. His career was literally made because of his hands. He is known because of his hands, right? Because he's a boxer. So that's an example. Now his public image is he's a phenomenon. He could he anybody everybody's that ever met Mike Tyson has always said that he is like a wild he's like very uncomfortable being in a room in because of this Rahu. It's like a wild card. You don't know what if this person is coming or going, or if you're next to a big like energy, like somebody who has this big strong presence. Okay, so that's an example. Now let's moving on to our 11th house. We kind of already know this. It's about your. I like the 11th house because the 11th house is the house of gains. It's one of the highest house of money. It's a Trichna house. It's actually one of. It's very karmic because it still kind of has unexpected events happen to it. The 11th house is also your like desire goals that you want to obtain. It's also your friends. So or working on the internet. That really shows me more internet than anything than the ninth house. Specifically, so for instance, let's say you have transits happening in your 11th house, like I have an 11th house transit, it will make you go on the internet or talk more to strangers. So the 11th house rules strangers. Again, you want to look for the ruler. So we have a Gemini 11th house. Mercury is the ruler. Mercury is in the first, but we have Venus, which is the ruler of the third, and the career 10th. And Mars is the ruler of the ninth and the fourth. So basically, Mike Tyson is a person that thinks that his friends are almost like family to him, which he actually always says that. If you ever seen an interview with him, he's always referring to his friends as family. Okay, the world is always testing him. It's funny because he's always had interactions with like people in the public. I don't know if you've ever I think he's beat up people in the streets before. But yeah, he has to protect his name against the public. Like his hands are registered. This is the public eye, public image. These are for the people that have that house. Now, let's say you're a younger person and you don't give a fuck about that, right? But this tells me about your friends. What kind of friends they are. So, is your friends combative, mean to you, Mars? They're in competition because Mars rules competition. This might work if you're a man, but if you're a girl, you don't want to be in competition with your friends. That is not in our nature. And that's what, so you want to determine, why do I keep attracting the same kind of friends? Or it also kind of, the 11th house kind of also shows me a little what's going to happen to your fifth house. Like, if it's that really what you dream for, do you really want to have children? Okay. And then let's moving on to the very last house. My favorite house is the 12th house. Now, the reason why I skipped over the 11th and the 12th. Well, the 11th house is the 12th house to the 12th house. I know that sounds insane and you're probably like, what? Well, if you count it, this is the 12th house is we're understanding the 12th house, right? We're coming to understanding of the last house. Is the house of undoing, is the house of let me read it to you actually. Sorry. Spirituality, subconscious is the house of sleep. It tells me if you got to change your sheets. Hello. Um it is the house of hidden causes, hidden limitations, secrets, fears, the need to withdraw, being in solitude. Planets there, like a lot of people that have planets there, especially the ruler of your rising, you kind of need to be in some type of like solitude, some type of like undoing. The 12th house is always going to bring losses. So if you have transit there, bitch, I have transits there like right now. It will bring some losses, not the entire time, but like for instance, the 12th house is also how you waste time. Why? Because the 12th house opposes your 6th house, the one that's on schedule. This is being on schedule. This is not being on schedule. So being this could the 12th house planets there or even transit there, again, this could be if you have a planet there, one, or if you again look at your transits for the month or for the year, whatever you want to do, and you got planets there, just know, yes, you are going to experience some type of loss or scam. But this could also be very good if you're in industries that are 12 house like. So, what are industries that are 12 house like? Like jail, hospital, creative ventures, hidden work, like undercover work, like investigative work. Um, it is also like working behind the scenes. So like if you work in production, that is the 12th house. If you work, spiritual jobs, you would have a good 12th house. Being able to read people's subconscious mind is a 12th house thing. Okay? So again, you want to look at the planet there. So for instance, this is an Aquarius one. So that means that in order for me to understand Michael Jackson's subconscious or creativity, which he's everyone found him very creative because he has Aquarius in the 12th house. Aquarius is ruled by Saturn. Saturn is in his 10th. Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, the modern ruler. And then the Vedic ruler is the North Node. So actually, in order to understand an Aquarius, you need to know three different other houses. Isn't that crazy? So what does that mean? So the Saturn is the one that you see right away. So people right away saw the tension that the world gave Michael, that gravitated to him. His North Node, he was like a different. He did things that people still to this day can't understand how he performed that long, or how he did the moonwalk was for many years a mystery to people, because the Rahu, the depositor of his creativity subconscious mind, is in is next to his body, the ruler of his body, which is Jupiter. Okay, Jupiter is the ruler of his body. Rahu is that creativeness. Now, for instance, Kanye West is a Cancer rising. He has Mars and Gemini currently in his 12th house. He lost everything. That's just an example of a live loss that we all witness. So that is the team, my friends. That is the 12 houses. The 12 houses are different areas of life. Once you understand the different areas of life, which I also recommend looking up the Vedic version of this, okay? So I will also kind of show you that towards the end. But once you understand very thoroughly your houses, they kind of follow through for both tropical, and it's going to be there for sidereal as well. So if I show you sidereal, this is Mike Tyson's natal chart sidereally. If you look at it side by side, this is his tropical, sidereal, tropical, sidereal. Notice how in his sidereal, he's a Leo rising, and so he is in tropical. Notice how he has Rahu in the 10th house on his midhaven, and he has it on Rahu in his 9th house, but still on that midhaven. Notice that. As he got older, he became more philosophical other than about his reputation. If you ever notice the development of that man. Okay? He has Mercury in the 12th because he's always talking about either way, he's always talking about 12th house things, mysterious things, he's always questioning the world around him. Right? So, and then mind you, look, he still has Sun and Jupiter in the 11th house of the world. So these are your belief systems of religion, life. Well, this is what the world is happening. Okay, this is life of a human, and this is the reality that the humanity is living in. Okay, and this is, if you notice how Mike Tyson is, his chart shows it. What kind of stuff he literally talks about. So another thing before we leave here, and I'm going to show you the Vedic way of understanding your houses. Okay, every one of these planets have a maturity age. So 16, 21, 24, 25, 28, 32, and 36, 42, and 48. Now, again, I have a video on this on TikTok. The maturity planets are good because they kind of explain what does that mean, maturity. You're going to look for the planet in your chart. Right, so for instance, if Jupiter matures at 16, that means that yes, your 8th house got some maturity, but so did your 10th house Sagittarius and your Pisces, because Jupiter rules both of them. So when one planet mature, it brings in those houses with them. Okay, so for instance, at 16 years old, Michael Jackson, he definitely had some type of growth in his career. And I think that's when he separated, if I'm not mistaken. I would have to go look. I don't know. I'm not going to look, but I'm just giving you an example. So if you read here, Jupiter's about high education. It affects your elders. You might even go on. Some people decide whether or not they're going to college or study abroad, or going to try to get a status. Jupiter is a ranking either way. The sun represents our career, our father, and you could kind of see the maturity of that at 21 years old. Your ego is not as much as at play. You're not as much like trying to showcase the world or need for attention. At 21 years old, that kind of dies down a little bit. You make the right decisions in your career, like you become a little bit more stable and it becomes a little bit more realistic. Before you wanted to be a cop, now maybe you'd realize maybe I'm better at investigations, right? Again, the sun awakens the Leo house that you also have. So the sun is in your Cancer, but the Leo house is your first house. So that means that is maturing that house as well, okay? So that is what these planets mean of maturity. So for those that are elders, I'm going to show you the bottom. I know some of you, if you want to explain that in the comments, Rahu and Ketu is about karma. So when you get older, you're not as obsessive with things. Rahu makes you really obsessive with life. Oh, I want. Well, at 48 years old, you don't want to be as obsessive with material things. And you don't really care about, anything spiritual. You just kind of let go of that wanting everything at the same time. So a person should realize your spiritual path, understanding that clinging on to things or people is not going to serve you any purpose. So at 48 years old, you just give up. So I'm sorry. If you are older, please put us on, if that makes sense, okay?